Today, we're going to look at encounter design in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. The team at Wizards of the Coast has vastly changed how encounter design for combats works in the new Dungeon Master's Guide. So strap in, and we're going to look at all the changes. So I'm a big fan of this book, the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. Not that it couldn't be better, but it has a lot of things for it that are really good. Overall, it's a solid book. You can hear Sean Merwin and I review the entire 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide on the Mastering Dungeons podcast. And we go into detail about everything we liked about it and what we would change, and even what we guessed would happen for 2024. Looking now at 2024, we certainly expected there would be changes to the encounter math, or at least we hoped for that, but we were curious how they could do that without changing the CR system, which they have not changed. But we thought, yeah, if you look at what DMs are going through out there, they're generally saying the game's a little too easy. So do you adjust monsters and make each monster at a given CR harder? And we've seen some of that in some previews. Do you change the encounter design? Well, we definitely see that here. So in the 2024 DMG, there's a three-step process. 1, choose the difficulty that you're going for. 2, determine your actual experience budget based on a table. And step 3, choose the monsters that you're going to use, sort of like a little counting exercise where you spend the XP budget based on the monsters you want. This is the same process we had in 2014. What's different is what's taking place behind it. For example, choose difficulty. Before, we had 4 different tiers of difficulty. So if you were running characters, whatever their level might be, through an encounter and you said, I want this encounter to be easy. That was one of the 4 challenge levels or difficulty levels you could shoot for. You could say instead, I want a medium level of challenge, or I want this encounter to be hard or even deadly. And those 4 challenge levels all had terms in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. This has changed in 2024. You now only have 3 levels. Gone is easy. And they've renamed them. It's now low, medium, and high. So there's no deadly as a term. But we'll see that the challenges, the way that they're named, is slightly different. So low, 1 or 2 scary moments, but they don't expect you to have casualties. 1 or 2 scary moments for low. Well, that's actually sounds harder than what I would have expected, right? I would think like the old term of easy, or the idea of what the word low tells me is, yeah, this isn't particularly hard. But no, here we're expecting 1 or 2 scary moments, even if no one's going to actually die or have their character die. 1 or more characters may need healing, sure. A single monster generally presents a low difficulty if you have 4 PCs and the monster is of the level that equals their CR. That to me sounds a little surprising. They're saying if you have 4 level 1 PCs and you have 1 level 1 monster. I think at low levels that might be true. At higher levels, I'd be surprised if that's true because of the way it tends to work with more PCs having more actions and lots of resources and tactics and so on. But, we'll see. It doesn't really say here much more than that. That's really the guidance for low. If we go to moderate, here it says that the fight could go badly for the characters if there isn't healing or if there aren't sufficient resources. They say that weaker characters could be taken out of the fight, and there's a slim chance of 1 or more deaths. That again, to me, doesn't sound like what I would have imagined if you said, hey, what's a moderate fight? I would think more about like the reduction of resources, but really not that there is a chance that really people would go unconscious or that it could go badly for the characters. But that is in fact what moderate now means as a definition. And we'll look at the math in a second. The last tier here is high. Here it says it could be lethal for 1 or more characters. Characters need smart tactics, quick thinking, and maybe a little luck to survive. That sounds like the old idea of deadly, although honestly, the old idea of deadly was actually less lethal than that sounds. Here, we're really saying a high level of challenge, you might not make it. Do they really mean that? Well, we're going to have to find out, and you'll hear this a lot from me in this video. A lot of this, we don't know. We're going to have to test it, because even though we can theory craft, until we see new monsters and really can run through all those monsters, we won't know. Characters have changed. They're stronger in 2024. Monsters are changing. They have been stronger in the examples we've seen. It's really hard to tell, but we'll do our best. Okay, so we've got these different challenge levels. Now we've got what's called an XP budget that we're going to spend. We have a new, simpler table because we only have those 3 columns. But as before, you look up your party level and you say, okay, I've got a first level character. So that's going to be this much XP for this challenge level. And maybe you have several characters and they're all the same level, in which case you just multiply by the number of characters in the party. Or you might average them out or just add up the values for each one. I've got a second level character and 4 first level, so you add those up. And that's your XP budget. Simple like it was before. That is the easy part. So what has changed in these tables? Let's take a look. So I can only share information that is public. And recently, a number of folks have posted, I think maybe after being in the UK, where there is a convention that gave early access to the DMG, folks have begun to post all this information out there. And so there are now publicly available the information of looking at what the 2024 XP table is like. So I can show it to you because it's public now. Otherwise, I would only be able to discuss it in my original notes, just discussed it in broad terms. But here you can actually look at it. So this is from my worksheet. You'll see this. I'm using, I have a tool that's available for patron subscribers where you can create encounters in it and do a variety of other design type things. So in the Adventure Designer tool, I have tables that drive everything. And here you can see on the left, the 2014 data, and on the right, the 2024 data. In both cases, we've got the level of the characters. Here it's 0 to 19, but I can go down to 20. And in fact, I will do that a little bit. Just go down here a step so you can see that better. So from 0 to 20, 0 is just kind of a control number there when nothing is chosen. But from 1 to 20, and you see there are originally the 4 categories: easy, medium, hard, deadly in 2014, and then low, moderate, high in 2024. So what happened? Well, if you look at the table for medium in 2014 on the left, right, those values, if I take 50, 100, 150, 250, 500, 600, 750, so levels 1 through 7, that actually gets copied over to low, right? So if you look and see these values here, right, this becomes the new low. So easy as a column is just gone. And now it's the medium values, levels 1 through 7, that become the new low. So it's naturally low is what we used to call medium, right? You might think moderate is medium. No, no, no. 2024's low is the old medium. And that's interesting. Then at the levels above that, what happens is you get basically the same thing. We kind of shifted over, medium becomes low, but then we add to the math, right? So the 900 becomes 1,000, the 1,100 becomes 1,300, and so on, all the way down to at level 20, what used to be 5,700 for a medium challenge is now 6,400, right? So that's substantial. You can add some monsters to that or choose much bigger monsters. And again, this math is per character. So that differential is being multiplied by the number of characters in the party, right? To drive much, much higher numbers. Now, what about the other categories? So the new moderate is actually the same data as hard through levels 5. So levels 5, you get to see 1 through 5. We're essentially a moderate is now what we used to call hard. And I think a lot of DMs ran hard when they wanted sort of a fair challenge. And that's what you're going to get now with the new moderate. After levels 5, so 6 and above, as before, you're getting the old numbers from hard plus a bonus on top of it, more XP than before. So if you have 4 characters in a new moderate fight at level 6, you're getting 100 for each character, so 400 extra XP to play with and add monsters to that to make it harder. Your high, well, yeah, you probably could guess where this is going. What we did was take deadly through levels 7. No, a little longer, levels 8. So levels 1 through 8 is your new high level. So high is essentially deadly 1 through 8th level. And then as before, you're taking those numbers across and you're adding to it. So everything is getting a little harder, and it's a whole category harder, if that makes sense, right? Your high is, you might think of that as hard. No, your high is now deadly, and at above level 8 and higher, it's got a boost on top of it. So that's significant. Think of every encounter out there that somebody created using the rules, and now it's getting a boost, and sometimes a significant boost, right? The difference between hard and deadly is not a joke. Some DMs would say they'd run deadly all the time when their characters were really, really tricked out. And that's now your high level 1 of 3. So that's interesting. And then it's getting a boost on top of that. So really interesting to see this math change this way. When I look at these values, one of the biggest questions I immediately have is, okay, wow. There's a lot going on here, right? PCs have weapon masteries that they're bringing to the table. Some of the subclasses are stronger. They get features at different levels than they did before, sometimes becoming much more effective at what they did. So there's a lot of power, perhaps, on the PC side, but generally they don't have more hit points, though sometimes they get temporary hit points, but they're still kind of as fragile as they were before. Then I look at, okay, monsters are harder, but it's hard to assess because we've only seen a limited number and the monster manual doesn't come out until a few more months from now. So then we've got this last equation around encounter design. And there are a lot of moving parts here. So I really wonder, how did this work? And given what production schedules and design schedules can be like, was the team really able to test every single part of this? Were they able to really say, okay, let's take the new monsters as we're writing the MM and run through bunches of combats at all this to make sure these tables really work? Or was this kind of a math level thing where you say, theory-wise, we know that this was off by a bit. If we bump it by X% or by X amount that increases in this kind of equation, everything is solved from the old math values? I don't know. I'm really curious to see how it'll pan out at the table, right? We saw 5th edition be really, really strong with the 2014 rules set while being a little weak, right? But good enough that everybody was having a blast, right? It's the most popular version of D&D by a mile. So will this be even better? Hard to tell right now, but there's a lot moving, and that does give me concern as a designer, right? Analytically, I get a little concerned. But let's look at the next step. So we did our first 2 steps. We've got we know what our challenge level is. We say, okay, we want to do a moderate challenge. And this is the level of the characters. I've got my budget. What do you do now? Well, you spend it. So let's run through that. So we're given a few pieces of advice around this process. We're going to spend our XP as before to buy monsters, right? So if I have 200 XP, I could say, oh, I want a Bugbear Warrior. That's 200. Easy, I did it. Or I could say, I want 4 monsters that are worth 50 because that adds up to 200, or any number of combinations, right? And so this becomes part of the big advice that we give in our book, Forge of Foes, right? How do you go about choosing monsters? Because it's hard. Do you start with the math? Do you start with the concept? Do you just dig into the story, right? How do you do this to marry it across? And it can be quite hard to do this for new DMs. Well, there isn't a whole lot here of guidance around how to do that. What we do get is we get a few points of sort of the process, process advice. So for example, don't go over the XP. And this is something that in 2014, when I looked at the way it was written and when I saw encounter design, a lot of time what was said was if you didn't hit the other level, you were okay. So if you were designing a hard encounter and you didn't hit the start of deadly, then you were okay. So it wasn't a cap, it was sort of the start of the phase. Now it is said to be a cap, right? So that number that we see for moderate, that is your highest amount of XP you can spend and be at moderate. So in that way, it takes a little bit of the fangs out of what I said previously of it being harder. I mean, it still is additional math, but you're not going over that then by some amount without becoming deadly, if that makes sense. Another really big piece is no multiplier. This isn't advice that appears, it's the reverse. In 2014, the DMG said to us, hey, having lots of monsters is harder than having a single monster. And so if you have a number of monsters, we need to adjust the math to account for that. So when you had more than a couple monsters, multipliers kicked in to say, okay, it is 2 monsters, 3 monsters, 4 monsters. So if you hit the multiplier, then you were multiplying your budget for those monsters by more. And we'll see some of that in the spreadsheet when I show that to you. But the fact that there isn't a multiplier is also another reason that in general, our math will go way up, meaning we can buy a lot more monsters that before we couldn't. Now, the multiplier was controversial. The reality is it didn't work in all cases. Sometimes it really was a good idea to have a multiplier because yes, you were going to overwhelm your party, especially at low levels, because they don't have so many resources. You could really cause damage if you didn't apply the multiplier. At higher levels, the multiplier, and also in corner cases, the multiplier could cause, you just have 3 of a monster, but they're not particularly powerful, but they just ballooned in their XP, became so expensive that you couldn't kind of run that if you wanted to do it by the rules. As a designer for official products and for organized play, I often had to use those rules. Although I know that other people who did the job I did would not use them because, again, with the multiplier, it felt like things got too easy. So that lack of a multiplier is another boost to the encounter design math and will make things harder for players and their characters. So here we are looking at this spreadsheet that is part of the adventure, encounter, and monster design tools that I provide to Patreon subscribers. If you like the work I do, please consider supporting me. And one of the things you'll get is this updated spreadsheet. I have not released this version yet. I'm doing some final testing. I also want to get a little closer to the release date, even though that math is out there and it's no longer covered by NDA because it's all out there. I do want to respect that and get a little closer to the release of the DMG in public before I release this to everybody. But it's essentially made and I'm just running it through tests. So what I've got here is in 2024, level 1 characters, 4 characters, and what they can face. And so what this spreadsheet does is take the math and find out what that total is. So for a low, moderate, or high fight, we see the values there. And what I'm going to use is the examples that are given to you in the 2024 DMG, because something that's really cool is they give us various examples and, in fact, numerous ways that we could build an encounter. So here, if I scroll up here, we will see that for encounter 1, what the DMG tells us is, hey, let's design a low challenge for 4 level 1 characters. And they give us 3 ways we could achieve that. So the budget is 200 XP, and you're going to spend that to buy monsters. So they say one thing we could do is have 1 Bugbear Warrior of CR1, which is an XP value of 200. That gives you your 200, and you're exactly at a low challenge. And again, unlike in 2014, we wouldn't want to go to 205 or 220 or any amount above that. This is like our cap, right? The other option the DMG gives us is we could have 2 giant wasps. And I just corrected, those are actually 100 XP each. So when we have 2 giant wasps at CR1 half, we get 200 XP, just like with 1 Bugbear Warrior. So it's exactly what we want, and that works. Or we could have 6 Twig Blights. Those are CR1 8. They're worth 25 each for 150 total XP. So we're under our 200 by a bit. And that is still a low challenge, right? If we did 7, that would be 175, and we could do 8 and actually be 200. Why'd they go with 6? I don't know. I guess just to show that you don't have to use up the whole budget if you don't want to. And they do actually have advice here. If you remember that whole idea of the multiplier, right? They do have advice here that says, sometimes it's good not to go with too many monsters at low levels. So they just broadly give you that advice, and this may be them trying to represent that. So let's take a look now. We'll use our old adventure designer from 2014. We've again have 4 level 1 PCs, and we're going to look at this challenge using the various encounter options that they gave us. So if we have a Bugbear Warrior, that is 200 XP, which ends up being what a medium challenge was before, right? Because medium became the new low, so that's as expected. There's no multiplier, or really what the multiplier is 1, right? This is the multiplier that comes across from the DMG. So if instead we go with 2 giant wasps, now, and I need to correct the XP here. Sorry. Their CR is 1/2. Now, whereas before here, we saw the CR 1/2, 2 giant wasps, 100 is equivalent to 200. Now we get the multiplier, 1.5, which makes this 300 and bumps it up to a hard challenge under the old rules, right? We don't have a multiplier anymore. So where we might have backed off of this and said, ooh, this is too much for a low challenge, moderate, medium under the old rules. We might have backed this out. Now the rules are encouraging us to do that. Let's check out this last example, and you can probably guess where this is going. The twig blights get a ×2 multiplier because there are 6 of them. And this is a hard challenge, even though we were under that expectation. And if we were to go with 8, which is affordable under the old budget, under the new budget of 2024, when we use 8 twig blights, that is a deadly encounter because the multiplier becomes 2.5 under the 2014 rules. So you can see how this change is really substantial as to we might have thought we would get away with. We may say here, well, 4 twig blights is actually appropriate, not 8, right? The math of 2024 says you could have 8 twig blights. The math of 2014 says you can have 4 and be exactly at that 200 XP value. That's all because of this multiplier giving us different values. And of course, the levels are different too, because we were creating a medium challenge here, and now it's a low challenge. And easy doesn't even exist as an option, whereas before we could say, hey, I'm just going to have 2 twig blights for just an easy, quick thing that we do. So let's go back up to the top of each sheet, and let's change this now to be that we are running level 3 PCs. I had to look and see what my level is. So I'm going to run level 3 PCs, and I'm going to add 1 more in. So we have 5 level 3 PCs for moderate challenge. And we're going to have 2 Nothics. Those are those guys with the big single eye. And then 9 Sturges, which is a pretty freaky encounter. So even though we have these 1/8 Sturges and 9 of them, right, they just add up a little bit. So the total ends up being 1125 XP. And that's a moderate challenge, as our worksheet tells us. Pretty cool option, right? Pretty cool. Now, another option, if we want to go Halloween themed, is 1 white, 1 warhorse skeleton, and 6 skeletons. And that adds up to 1100, a little under that maximum that we could have, and works perfectly well for a moderate challenge according to the new rules. Does it play well? I won't be able to tell you until I see these new statistics and until I run this encounter. But at least through the math of the game, we are within those guidelines, right? So again, this is the example in 2024. They're showing us what this could look like. Let's go now here to the encounter design tool. We will go with our level 3 PCs, and we have a 5th one here. So we can choose our 5th PC. And if we go down and take a look here, we can see that 2 Nothics and 9 Sturges ends up being a ×3 multiplier because of the number of creatures that are there, because it's not just per type. And that is 3,375 XP, right? So substantially more than 3 times the amount of XP because of the multiplier is going to come in. And we are seeing that, we've just got a deadly encounter for our PCs. It's also worth saying that one of the things that was going on in the past was there was something called an adventuring day. And based on your level, you had amount of XP each character could earn an adventuring day before they really should rest. After you defeat that much monster XP, you are probably out of resources, and you're expected to take 2 short rests also during the adventuring day, right? So 2 short rests and a long rest in here. That concept was gotten rid of. In a very interesting interview, James Wyatt says that the encounter math for 2014 was wrong, and that they've also looked at the adventuring day and said this does not reflect what people actually do. And I want to say yes and no. Like, yes, there are plenty of times when I'm running an adventure and I'm saying, this is the only fight today. So the adventuring day concept doesn't quite apply. And then other times in a dungeon, I might be in a dungeon full of many, many rooms and kind of an incredible amount of XP that they could go through and resource draining if they were to face all of it. And then I have my more typical things, right? You know, like 4 encounters in a bandit headquarters or something, right? And that might be like a typical adventuring day. While the game has all that diversity to it, I don't think that getting rid of the adventuring day is a huge asset. In that I think the game should, and this is just me as a designer thinking, the game, and as a DM too, the game should have a concept of how many resources you're expected to burn in a day. And that these encounter levels, like moderate, low, high, those represent draining resources as well. And that is an important part of play. Running out of spells is important. Using up your short rest features is important. Feeling that you've had to spend hit dice is important. And if we're never addressing that, if there's no mechanic, a game underlying math that addresses that, I think we end up in a place that is closer and closer to where it almost like doesn't matter. Like the idea is that you just, like if everything were an at will, right? And all your spells could always be cast. They're all cantrips, right? That wouldn't be great. And we don't, yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. I feel like we veer a little towards that when we say that the adventuring day doesn't matter at all. I think better would be, or what I would have liked, is to say the adventuring day doesn't always apply, but sometimes it will. And here's some things to keep in mind, such as generally you can face this many encounters of this kind of difficulty. And I think that would have been a nicer way to work. The math of the game should support that, even if there are differences, like how many magic items you have, if you have 2 clerics or whatever, right? There can be that, but we can talk about that and think about that. Anyway, I'm on a soapbox. Back to the math. So you can see here that when we use these Nothics and Sturges, this is a deadly challenge instead of being a moderate challenge for 5 PCs. And when we go to the white example, we're going to see something similar. We've got 1 white, 1 warhorse, and 6 skeletons. Those 6 skeletons push us into a times 2.5 multiplier. And you can see how it's 2,750 XP, less challenging per the math than the first example, but still very difficult. An interesting thing is if we take out the skeletons, right, and we say something like, 2 whites, that can be a different math, or let's say 1 white, 2 warhorse skeletons, right? That already is a hard challenge, right? Which is a moderate in 2024. So it's amazing how quickly the math becomes difficult. Or let's do this. Let's say 1 white, 1 warhorse skeleton. That's already a hard challenge. So this is a moderate under 2024 rules because of that multiplier and the old level, right? That is really interesting, right? So you could argue that in the game, you are now getting 6 skeletons for free, right? That's pretty interesting. Our last example is going to be for level 15 PCs. So let me set this up. Okay, so here we are, a high challenge. I've set up the spreadsheet to have 6 level 15 PCs for both 2014 and 2024. In 2024, we have, did I get this wrong? 2, there we go. 2 adult red dragons and 2 fire giants for a total of 46,000 XP. And if we go up here to the table, you can see that 46,800 is the limit of what we could have. Actually, working on this, I just thought of a nice feature I can do. I can actually put in the color coding back for that kind of purple deadly level, because if we do, here 46,000 XP is just almost entirely the high threshold, right? And now this is a threshold. So if I say 3, currently it's still high, except it isn't really. I've gone over, right? So I'm going to actually add something to the spreadsheet to tell me, no, you've gone over. This isn't even high challenge because now it's a threshold. Whereas before, in 2014, when you hit the deadly level, deadly was not a ceiling. And a good question was, how far can you go over deadly? Can you go twice deadly? It was something that the game kind of didn't really didn't really address. But okay, so we see 46,000 XP here. It's a high challenge. 2 adult red dragons and 2 fire giants. That sounds pretty challenging for level 15 PCs. Pretty cool. Adventure designer for 2014. If I do that same thing, 2 adult red dragons and 2 fire giants, that is deadly by 69,000 XP, right? So the combination of the multiplier and the fact that, you know, deadly is now high, this is 69,000. And if you look at the old rules, 38,400 was our max. So we're, you know, what is that? 30,600 above the cap, right? Something like that. So we're really substantially above the cap, and not quite double, but really, really above that. Which shows you how much this math of this game has changed. You know, encounters that you would have looked like, oh yeah, this math tells me to absolutely not run this for these players. This will kill anybody, right? It's way above deadly. And now under the new math, it's a high challenge. Yeah, it's hard, but it is exactly at the cap of what we're very close, just a few hundred away from what we consider the maximum that players can handle. And hey, if luck doesn't go their way, this might kill them. But we're expecting them to make it through enough that this is a design paradigm, right? It's our cap for this high challenge threshold. That is really super interesting. And it begs the question, as I said before, is this too hard? Right? Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is too hard. I've got to see the monsters, and I've got to be at more tables with 2024 characters. I've run a number of 2024 characters, but not at all these different levels and these kinds of configurations. So I'm now really dying to do this to see how this works. The DMG has made these big moves, and does that work? What the DMG does give us is some troubleshooting advice. Again, I've said before this, they talk about many creatures. More creatures means you can have lucky streaks against characters, and if you have more than 2 creatures per character, we're told to include some fragile creatures that can be defeated quickly, especially at levels 1 to 2. And actually, let me talk about low level a little bit, because one of the things that I was surprised by, D&D is at 2014 is quite lethal at low levels. Like especially level 1, but also levels 2 and 3. When I run a lot of D&D, and you can really overwhelm parties at those levels with published encounters as is. Now we're moving a whole tier over, right? The whole moderate or medium becomes low, right? And deadly becomes high. So we'll see how this goes. But at least we're told that when you have multiple creatures, be careful and make some lower level, lower CR creatures that can kill off quickly, which maybe is an important tactic as a player, right? To reduce that variance and target those smaller things very quickly. Adjustments. If a player is absent, you want to remove creatures, or you may want to keep it as intended. We see that die rolls and other factors can result in variance. That's already very, very true in 2014's DMG math, but it's something we get warned about here. And we are told that you can adjust it on the fly. Some creatures may choose to flee, or you could add reinforcements if you need to make it harder. They don't really talk about the how of it, right? Because there's an art to that, like how to have a monster flee and why without it feeling like you're just giving the PCs a pass. But at least this topic is raised. We're told that CR0, as before, use it sparingly. It doesn't tend to do a lot for combat, but they say consider swarms instead if you want to represent sort of weaker creatures in high quantities. There's some advice around the number of stat blocks you should use. This is something we cover in Forge of Foes many ways. Things like, if you have combats that have a ton of stat blocks, that's going to be complicated. And if you have very complex creatures to begin with, you want to keep your number of stat blocks especially low. We're told that the best combats have one kind of creature combined with another. Fire giants and hellhounds. Yeah, that can be really strong. But as we talk about in Forge of Foes, we also say, sometimes you have a concept in mind, like we've got a leader, a lieutenant with a bunch of underlings, or we have one big boss with a whole bunch of little guys. Those are really fun concepts to use. We have a team that kind of matches the number of the characters, and they're all equivalent, right? Those are all fun things to play with. And I wouldn't just say that the only or that the best is this kind of idea of two concepts. It can be fun to have some variance there. A lot of it really depends on the story you're trying to tell, right? We're told that powerful creatures, if you have a high CR, you want to be careful with. So like an ogre can kill a level 1 wizard in one blow. Certainly good advice. Unusual features they can't easily overcome. I think here they're talking about things like resistances, immunity, magic, things like that. And so they say if PC, if the monster's CR is higher than the PC level, then be careful with those kinds of unusual features that can't be easily overcome. And then we get some other advice. We get monster behavior and initial attitude. This seems to be something they're leaning in more heavily. So if you like that kind of classic play that sort of says, hey, roll on the table and see what their initial disposition is, then this is suggested a little more strongly. What they don't say here, but it is elsewhere in the rules, is the idea that you can change that behavior through play. But it is important to note that. We get a table of 8 monster personalities to portray. That's helpful for especially new DMs and just reinforcement of kind of good ways of thinking about monsters and making them interesting. Monster relationships, like, hey, have them be rivals. Yes, they're attacking the party, but they actually argue with each other, right? Things like that. And I love that kind of advice. Again, there's a lot of it in Forge of Foes. Reactive tactics, that denizens in a place can react to the PCs over time, setting ambushes, doing things like that. It's a general dungeon ecology type information. And then we get some additional guidance on things like encounter pace, creating tension, rests, random encounters, and things like that. That's all really good advice. Absolutely 100% lean into it. And the more of that advice you want, the more I want to recommend to you this beautiful book that we worked so hard with Mike Shea and Scott Fitzgerald Gray called Forge of Foes. Link in the show notes on how you can get that. So I hope this has been really useful to you. I think these are kind of astounding changes. Like, they're major, right? This is not minor stuff. I would not have guessed that the team was going to go this far to really say, yeah, let's move a whole column over at all levels, remove the easy category entirely, and then say, okay, and we're going to add extra XP at the high levels. I did not expect that to go that way. As always, would love more guidance around everything, but I think that in general, this is a sound approach. We need to see the rest of it all work to make sure this is really well fine-tuned. But overall, as an approach, this seems like a really sound start. I love this part of the DMG. Excited to see how this plays. Can't wait to see it play out at my table. And we'll see. Hope that you enjoy this video. If you like the work that I do, please consider liking and subscribing and all that, notifications. And go to alphastream.org. Let me know that you're enjoying it. And if you enjoyed enough, consider please supporting me and joining our Patreon Discord. We have a lot of fun there. Thank you to everybody who makes these videos possible. Really appreciate it. I will see you later.